Welcome to the Millennial Body Image Project, where we dive into the unique and messy body image journey that continues to shape our generation.
We're here to flip the script on toxic wellness culture, challenge weight stigma, and tackle the intersectional forces that shape how we see our bodies and our health.
Because your body is not a problem to be fixed.
Hey, Christina, I would love you to start this episode.
Yeah, I never want to start Liz, so that's like a running joke.
This is a running joke.
Everybody listening to today's episode is going to be listening with their mouths wide open. I cannot believe Christina is starting this episode. I'm really excited because we have Elizabeth Earnshaw on today talking about her new book, Till Stress Do Us Part. You're more commonly known as Liz Listens on Instagram, correct? And if you follow her, you probably already know about her new book coming out. We're so excited to have you come on. And I loved this book. I really loved how it humanized and validated the experiences that couples have, especially when you're adding in the dynamic of children into the relationship. And I think it's really under discussed a lot of times because especially when you go and you get married and then you plan to have children together, all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, wow, why do I hate my spouse? But this episode's not about that. But I just wanted to say that I really loved it from that experience. And I really enjoyed how you wove stories from real couples and your own relationship, which made it feel really validating to hear a couples therapist talking about some of these things too. So I recommend it for everyone. But I would really love to hear you, Liz, share with us like what inspired you to write this book, and especially from the angle of focusing on stress and the lack of the ability to manage it, actually causing problems in relationship rather than relationships being the primary cause of stress, which is an interesting little swap, which I thought was cool coming from you as a couples therapist.
Yeah. So obviously our relationships can cause us a lot of stress. Right?
Well, what
Two things can be true.
True. And the question often, what happened to make this relationship become one of the stressors? And sometimes it's because the relationship just sucks and it's stressful. But often there's changing challenges and transitions that happen throughout people's relationship, that when a couple is presented with them, they're just human beings. They've never had kids before. They've never had to figure out how do they deal with aging parents, like whatever the stressor is. And they're just having to wing it. And often, unfortunately, we don't wing navigating stress with another person very well because we are overwhelmed, they're overwhelmed, and we're in this like threatened space where we're just going to make decisions and take action and show emotions that make sense to us, but might not make sense to the other person. So when the pandemic hit, I had been noticing for a few years, actually, that a lot of the couples I was working with, their issues weren't really like those traditional couples therapy. I think what people think. It wasn't all infidelity. It wasn't these couples that should have never gotten together. It wasn't people who were like horrible to each other, saying awful things. It was a lot of people coming into therapy who otherwise had pretty functional relationships or historically had pretty functional relationships. And I was doing like traditional therapy with them. Let's learn to talk to each other. Let's learn to be empathetic and recognize each other's emotions. And it just wasn't super helpful to a lot of the couples. And I just did it because it's what you do as a couples therapist. And then when the pandemic hit, I started to notice a few years before that, as I had mentioned in the book, like my relationship's struggling. What the heck is going on? Why can't I use these tools to even make my life feel better? And then it became very obvious between myself and my client. Oh my gosh, so much of this is just that there is out of control stress in people's lives. And it made me realize that all these things that we talk about in these kind of different baskets, like mental load or trauma or flooding or whatever it is, those are actually really core to why people don't get along in their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have great communication skills, but if you don't know what to do about that, then it doesn't really matter because you're going to get hijacked. So that's like a long roundabout explanation.
No, I really love how you brought up the mental load. Can you, and I feel like it's something that you hear, we're hearing a lot more about in social media and the work of Eve Radonsky. Was it Radonsky?
Brodsky.
Yeah, Brodsky. Yes. And we're hearing a lot more about her and fair play, but that's usually for couples who I hear about it more from couples who have children, but I don't think it's only just from that perspective at all. And I'd love for you to talk on those three things that hijack, like the mental load, some of the trauma stuff, and then the flooding. Cause I don't know if everyone knows what flooding is. So if you could share a little bit about each one of those and how they hijack the relationship.
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about mental load, and yes, it's a more popular discussion, but I think still most people actually haven't heard about it.
Yes.
You're thinking about all of the work it takes to do anything that isn't physical. So it's not even just relationship stuff, right? There's mental load at your job. There's mental load in your friendships. It's having to remember things, research things, delegate, just know that something needs to be done, carry the to-do list in your head. So it's everything that's happening in your mind, maintaining relationships, all of these things. And you're going to have it no matter what. It exists. The problem is that what we find in relationships is that there's a major disparity between how much is taken on of the mental load in partnerships. And this happens in queer couples. This happens in hetero couples. It happens across the board. But what we do find is that when you have a guy and a girl in a relationship together, the woman is taking on the majority of the mental load. And that causes a major issue because that person is likely also working in our current times outside of the home. And we know that they also do more of the physical load at home in terms of daily consistent activities. Like these are all, there's statistics about all of this. And so while a male partner might have jobs that they do, their jobs tend to be less frequent. Like they might take the oil to get changed or mow the lawn, but these are like one day a week, one time a month, once a year type things. So when you have a partner who has a ton of physical tasks, might also be working outside of the home, and then also is carrying a lot in their mind, what's going to happen is that over time, they're going to become incredibly overwhelmed. And that overwhelm is going to move to resentment in the relationship. And when there's resentment in the relationship, a whole bunch of funky things start to happen, passive aggressive or straight up aggressive. And there's a lot of unhappiness, and obviously the relationship becomes fractured. Ideally, when people notice this is happening, it's usually not happening because anyone wants to be a jerk. I will say that 99% of the people I work with, as soon as the partner hears about the concept and they recognize that they have never once looked anything up about their kid's illness or something, they're like, oh, wow, that is rude of me. I can't believe I'm doing that to you. But once you notice that's there, you really want to have a relationship where you and your partner are able to redelegate. So it feels fair. Doesn't even need to be equal, just so it feels fair. So that's the mental load.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you for explaining it, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what it is. And then the other one that I wanted you to clarify too is the flooding. And then if you could share how this shows up and in the way that people communicate and the resentment and how that kind of builds out from there.
Yeah. So when we are under distress, our bodies have a physiological reaction. So this is not a thought through reaction where you're sitting there and you're thinking, wow, this is a stressful conversation. I'm going to start withdrawing and silent treatment and doing the silent treatment, or I'm going to yell at you. We're not thinking these things. But what's happening is our body is sensing that there's something happening towards us that feels like a threat. Unfortunately, it can't differentiate from a true physical threat, like an animal chasing you and wanting to eat you or being mugged or something like that, versus a relational threat where you just don't feel like you're being heard or getting your needs met, or you're being triggered back to some other situation that felt similar but wasn't the same, but was upsetting. When we have that experience, our body starts to prime us for protection. And so all of our organs and all of our body systems actually start reacting very quickly. And our internal organs change, which is why people have to pee a lot when they're nervous, or they pee themselves if they're really scared. But you'll notice your mouth gets dry when you're nervous. All sorts of things happen to your organs. The biggest one that people feel is their heart races.
Yeah.
It's trying to pump all the blood through your body, and it's trying to pump all of these helpful stress hormones through your body so you can get ready to go. When your heart is racing, it means it's doing all of that. So what it's also doing is it's making your muscles begin to tense up in case you have to fight. It's changing the way that you intake oxygen in case you need to run. And it changes the way that your brain functions. It creates a brain functioning in which you become very self-focused for survival. And so when you are flooded and in this state, you are more argumentative because your point needs to win. The other person can't be taken care of. You need to take care of yourself. You become less empathetic. It's very hard to see the other person's point of view. You aren't funny anymore. No. And you'll say, we all know we're flooded when somebody tries to make a loving joke and we go, it's not funny.
Yes. I'm not laughing.
I'm not laughing. What would make you think that right now is an appropriate time to make a joke?
No, totally. Yes. It's in there.
We can't laugh because we don't feel safe. We can't show affection. So our partner will say, let's just have a hug really quick. And we'll say, I don't want to be touched. And that's because, again, our body is telling us you're not safe. The only way you can get safe is by winning this fight or getting away from it or playing dead. And so we start to, when we're flooded, behave in a non-relational way. Our voices become strained in a way that signifies threat to somebody. Our facial expressions start to look mean or removed. And so when people are flooded, they can't navigate conflict, but they try to anyway, which is the problem. And then it makes things worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Dana, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, I would love to go into some of the things that can lead us to become flooded, whether they're external of the relationship or internal within the relationship. And we love how you talked about that in the book. It's like a really important distinguishing factor of learning. Is this something that is happening between the two of us, or is this what you tend to call like a third that's coming in and causing tension within the relationship? So could you talk a little bit more about the concept of thirds? Because we thought that was really fascinating and really helpful to bring to light as well.
Yeah. So in our relationships, you and your partner are your primary attachment figures in adult life. And so you become each other's village. As children, hopefully you have parents or caregivers who provide that sense of security and protection. In adulthood, we look to other adults for that same thing, whether it's best friends or family members or a partner. When you're in a committed partnership, you and your partner are supposed to be creating something around you, almost like a bubble of we're protecting each other, we're keeping each other safe. Unfortunately, in life, not unfortunately, just normally, normally in life, but I'll tell you the unfortunate part, we have lots of other things we have to tend to also. Our partner is not the only person, and that shouldn't be the case. That would be horrible. But we still have friends, we still have family members, we still have jobs, we have hobbies, we have all of these types of things. We have to be really mindful about the way that those things are using our time resources, emotional resources, money resources, and whether or not the use of those resources is hurting the relationship. So that's what a third is. Now, when we mismanage those thirds, what that might look like is a partner who spends all sorts of money on their hobby. And their partner is saying to them, we're broke. I'm so stressed out. I picked up all these extra hours at the office, and yet you just spent a ton of money on new golf clubs, or you just bought all new furniture for our bedroom, and we can't afford these things. You're spending all of this money and energy and time in a way that's detrimental to me. Or, hey, why do you let your mom give so much advice and you don't ask me? All this energy is coming from the outside. And that can cause a lot of stress on a relationship. So a lot of the couples that I meet with, they're under distress because they come in and they say, I'm so upset with my husband because he told his mom that we could do X, Y, and Z, and we can't, and I'm overwhelmed. Or he let this person talk badly about me. Or I'm upset with my wife because her mom told her that she shouldn't talk to me about something and she didn't do it. So that causes a feeling of stress, of threat, and that creates distress. So that's one way that thirds can cause problems. Another way is that there's things that aren't really the fault of your partner, but they're hard in their lives. And so they bring stress into the relationship. So they're having a really bad experience at work. They're about to get fired. They're going to come home and be really upset. Their parent is very sick and they're their parent's caregiver. And maybe their stress levels are like completely filling their cup. And so those are external stressors. Internal stressors are stressors that are happening in the relationship. So the way you talk to each other, disagreements that you can't seem to work through. Maybe you're constantly arguing about which medical treatment to get for your child. So you and your partner, because of your inability to get through things in a way that makes each person feel secure, you and your partner are creating the stress in the relationship.
I really love how you distinguish how there's external ones and then the way that the internals are. And then one of the things that you had talked about a lot in the book too is ultimately around how you protect your relationship from the thirds by creating different types of boundaries. And we want to get into that, but I don't want to jump ahead because one of the things that we've noticed, and it's really interesting, but this comes up a lot in our client sessions, especially clients who are in relationships, is how body changes become a big part in a relationship.
Yeah.
And we were even thinking, like Dana brought it to my attention as she was reading it. She goes, oh my gosh, in the third chapter, like in the chapter, the third, are you noticing or how are you thinking about how body changes can become a third in a relationship? And I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. We see this all the time. And so we thought it'd be really interesting for you to share with us a little bit about how a couple can navigate that as a third and how do you create boundaries if someone gains weight and it's a stressor on them or both of their partner, or if one person has an eating disorder and how that is a stress on them and their partner, and how like all the different things that come up. We would love for you to talk about that a little bit too, if that feels relevant.
Hey friends, Dana here with a quick update before we continue with the episode with Liz. So we wanted to let you know that we're making a slight shift for the remainder of this season and moving to a bi-weekly release schedule for the episodes on the main feed. So this change will allow us to dive even deeper into the topics that you love without sacrificing the quality of the content. So of course, talking more about non-diet nutrition, managing chronic health conditions, and of course, body image. So next week, to continue the conversation on stress, like we're doing this week with Liz, we're doing an episode called Do You Need a Cortisol Detox? Because we've been getting questions from you all, and we knew we needed to break this down. And that will be an episode over on Patreon. We're going to be debunking the recent social media trends around cortisol detoxing, which of course is total bullshit. We're going to be breaking down popular supplements and what you can actually do to support your cortisol in a non-restrictive way. So if you've been enjoying our episodes and want to support us so we can keep creating meaningful content, we would love your support over on Patreon. It is a great way to join the community, to engage with us on your questions from the episodes, and to keep the podcast going strong. Plus, in exchange for your support, you're getting over 2 years of bonus content and deep dive episodes. So if you want continued access to every episode every month, join us over there. The link, as always, will be in the description. And if you're not ready to join us over on Patreon right now, no worries. You will still be getting the bi-weekly, regularly scheduled episodes. And if you could, we would love it if you would share this episode with a friend or leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts or a star rating on Spotify or wherever you listen. It means the world to us, and we really appreciate all of you.
Yeah.
And I'll give an example too.
I was about to ask you. I would love to hear an example.
Yeah. So a lot of the people that we work with are coming to us because they want to work on their health without triggering their relationship with food, whether they have a history of an eating disorder or chronic dieting, or if they've gone to other practitioners that are like, oh, you have this condition, you should do this super restrictive diet.
Yeah.
And most of the time, when people are coming out of severely restrictive patterns, whether it's an eating disorder, disordered eating, chronic dieting, also over-exercising is tied in there a lot, their body starts to self-regulate and gain weight. But in the society that we live in, 99.9% of the time, weight gain is viewed as, oh, there's something wrong with you, or you're doing something wrong. And so then when we see people come to us, they're like, one of the major stressors that I'm dealing with is I'm trying to work on my body image and my relationship with food, but my partner thinks that I should be doing this and this, which is almost counter to what we're working on in sessions
Right.
because I'm trying to feel more neutral about my body and not hate myself for these body changes because I know I'm not doing anything wrong by stopping restricting, right? I'm actually trying to work on my health, but their partner has a very different view of what their health should be. And maybe they think, oh, maybe you should just count macros. Maybe they're trying to give helpful suggestions of, oh, do you want to go to the gym together? Or, oh, do you want to do this? And internally, this person is freezing of, I know that is not a great thing for me to be doing right now. And it's super triggering. But then they freeze because they don't want to be in this combative situation with their partner. So
Sure.
we see this so much. So we would love your take on it as a part of thirds.
Yeah, absolutely. These types of things just around what you do with your body and how you take care of it or don't take care of it. It shows up a lot in couples therapy, whether it's concerns around thinking your partner has an eating disorder.
Say that could also
Another
come
will
up
be
too.
complaints. Like the partner might be like, I'm so unhappy with my body. That's why we're not having sex. I feel fat, I feel ugly. And the other partner is, from their perspective, I love you and I think you're beautiful or hot or whatever. But if you're unhappy, why don't you start running? And then the partner will be like, don't you understand? I work 40 hours a week and then I come home and I have to deal with the kids and there's not really time for me to run. And they're like, if you really cared this much, then you would start exercising, or why don't you change the way you eat? So it can be really challenging. It comes up with drinking. It comes up with, I'm really worried. A lot of people will try to just talk to me in couples therapy. Like, could I talk to you about my worries about so-and-so? I've noticed she hasn't been eating and I don't know what to do about it. So this can cause a lot of different challenges in the couple. One is it can create a sense of my partner is judging me or controlling me. Another is it create triangulation, which for anybody listening is when people don't talk directly to each other about something. So they're telling like one therapist, but they're not telling their partner, or they're like the partner is talking to his mother about his concerns about his wife, but isn't talking directly to his wife. So it just creates a lot of different layers. And one of the first places that I try to start is by naming that as a stressor. Like, you're unhappy with your body. This is a stressor for you. And therefore, it's a stressor for the relationship. And that way it opens up room for both people to be able to say, yeah, it does cause me some sort of distress. While also then being able to say to the partners, let's not make it about each other right now. Like, instead of you so frustrated because your wife keeps saying she's so unhappy with how she looks, and you're thinking, I just want her to solve the problem. Why isn't she going to the gym if she's that unhappy? Let's say, like, feeling unhappy with how someone looks is a stressor. And if we can look at that together, how can you help each other? Or instead of the other partner saying, they're always on me about needing to eat more. And I know that. I'm seeing an eating disorder therapist. Of course, I already know that I should do that. And they just don't leave me alone about it. Yes. And unfortunately, the stressor is making you turn on each other. But let's externalize this. Like, the eating disorder is the stressor. Like, it's not you. You're not the one causing the problems. It's not your partner. And let's look together at what's going to reduce the impact of this on the relationship. And it varies what that is, but a lot of it is actually learning just to be able to talk about it. Talk to me about how your body is stressing you out. And I'm not going to solve it. I'm just going to ask you why it upsets you. What are you thinking about it? What feelings come up? And I'll be present. Let's actually talk about why it's hard for you when I'm complaining about my body, but then I don't go to the gym. Like, where's that frustration coming from? Because ultimately, usually that conversation leads to a good place where the other partner is like, I don't want you to eat food or do anything that's not good for you. I'm just worried about you. You're so unhappy. You feel like you're not attractive. And I think you're attractive. And I just want to help you. And so that can start to make it so that they're not pointing fingers at each other, or trying to fix each other, or trying to like steamroll over the issue. But instead, they're just saying, it's here. It's an issue that's in our lives. But let's look at it together and figure out how we can deal with it as a unit.
I really appreciate where you're coming from, because I think sometimes what can happen is it sounds like the partner's saying, why don't you go to the gym? Or like, why don't you like start doing something different? And one, we know from like our perspective, from an ED perspective is like, well, we're weight inclusive, and that's not the way that people typically just feel better about their bodies magically if they start going to the gym, right? Like that's not magically how that happens. That there's a deeper rooted feeling, a part of it. And it can feel really invalidating when your partner just says, here, go do this thing, or here's how you can fix it. It's, oh, what? I never thought about going to the gym before. What are you like? What is this brand new information? Like I've thought of that. And it can feel really frustrating. And I love the idea of how creating this is like, oh, this is this thing that we're going to support each other with. And here's how we can do that together. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about one, I think you mentioned about how it's almost like identifying this elephant in the room. There's this elephant here, and here it is. And it's your eating disorder, or it's your body image, or your self-worth, or things like that that are coming up. And then how can we find a way to support each other through all this? And I'd love for you to share some ways, because in the book, you talk about how boundaries are a part of that. I'd love for you to walk through some examples of what a boundary could look like from both perspectives, because I think both partners have a valid place, because sometimes it is like they're just looking to, I want to solve this problem for you and I'll make time for you to do it. If you want to go to the gym and feel better about yourself and whatever, if that would make you feel better, I'll watch the kids for the afternoon. I'll spend the time with them. You go and do that. I'll parent for a while so that you can take a break and go do this thing for yourself and all that stuff. And it could be coming from a very loving place, and not, if you went to the gym, you'd lose 10 pounds. It might not be coming from that place.
Yeah.
It might just be
Even when it sounds like that, it's not always an unloving place. It's usually a frustrated place because not everybody's a therapist. So most people are like, you're telling me that you think that you look bad. And I'm telling you, you can spend any money you want. You can spend any time you want. You're not doing it. And the other person's like, well, that's really invalidating because you're not understanding.
Yeah. Or not safe for me. It's not, whoa, that's not the support I needed.
Exactly. And so once you can identify that this is a common issue, instead of this is just my partner's, this is the patient. They're sick and I have to figure out how to get them better. And I don't mean just like with true sicknesses, but we often decide that the other person is the patient. But it's him. His mother was emotionally removed, and that's why he doesn't talk about his feelings. Or it's her. She hates her body, and that's why we never have sex. Or it's this other person because they drink too much, and that's the reason that there's the issue. But instead being able to say, here is the issue. So with this example, you're having there's body image issues going on. And this is a stressor. This is a stressor for our relationship. And I think it's really important that both people accept that. I think sometimes it can create shame. And on the person who's experiencing the body image issues, they sometimes become a barrier to moving forward, because they will put not boundaries down, they will put barriers down and say, it's my stressor, it's not your stressor, so let me talk to my therapist about it. But you have to both be willing to say, but this still does have a very real impact on the relationship. Like it's upsetting you both, or it's causing distance in you both. And then the second thing I think is then coming from a place of, what are the real boundaries? For example, I prefer to listen to my doctor's orders on what my nutritionist or whoever, my therapist, on how I'm supposed to navigate food or exercise or anything. And what would be really important to me is that I can talk to you about how I feel, and that when I'm sharing with you what I've been told, that you're able to respect that, right? On the other end, when somebody is struggling with something that they're getting treatment for, it can be challenging because there might not be as many boundaries. Like you can't say, well, if that doesn't work in a month, I do want you to start going to the gym. Like that's not going to work. But I think what is important is saying, I can totally do that. And something that's very important for me is that you recognize the impact on me when you're struggling with these things. And so what I need to know, to be able to do, is when I'm concerned about you, I need to be able to bring it up. Because remember, boundaries are about like what you're going to do, right? You're not going to say to your partner, what I need to see you doing is I need to see you going to your therapist and I need to see you changing your habits. But what I'm going to do is, when I'm noticing that this is causing a huge rift in our relationship, or when I'm worried about how you're doing, I need to be able to say something to you. And that's my limit. Or I need to be able to also bring up how this is making me feel. whatever it is. And so just being able to open the door. Some other examples around that also might be my boundary is that you're not telling other people about this. I know that sounds wild that I would even have to say that, but unfortunately people will do that, like I need you not to tell your mom anymore that I've been struggling with eating or my body image or whatever it is. It's really important to me that that's private. So that's another boundary that you could have. You can have boundaries around how anything that is something between the two of you, a resource between the two of you is used. You can do whatever you need to do, whatever has been asked. And I need us to have conversations around how money is spent, right? Or I'm thinking about drinking. I'm not going to force you to stop drinking because I can't do that. And my limit is we don't have alcohol in the house. That's just what's going to happen. And you can have these boundaries, which can ultimately deal with this stressor. But they're obviously unique to every couple. Can you think of some like with your own clients that have been important?
Yeah, I was thinking of something also that can make, before we even go into boundaries, another layer that can make this really difficult is when we're working with people on their relationship with food and their body image, a lot of what we're working on is the internal belief structure that they have around what should and shouldn't be with food and bodies. For example, like healthy does not equal a certain size, right? And just because you were smaller before or after or whatever, it doesn't automatically mean that you are healthy. It's hard enough to do that on your own, but then a lot of our clients get in this very kind of conspicuous in-between situation where they're almost there on their own, but then they feel like they have to convince their partner to be on the same page in order to create that safe bubble as well. Because I've worked with many clients who feel like they can really only work on their relationship with food when they're out of the house, because as soon as they enter the house again, they feel like they're being judged and they can't keep certain foods around, or they can't work on fear foods, or they can't work on different triggers and stuff, because it automatically feels like as soon as they step in the door, they're in an unsafe environment again. I would love if you could talk about, speaking of boundaries, right, to bring it back. No matter what tangent I go on, I always try and bring it back at some point. It's the ADHD. But it's thinking about if the belief structure that you're working on is either in opposition or different than the belief structure that your partner has around food or around bodies or around health, how do you then set that boundary, not a barrier, without being like, you just need to get on board with this, and then figuring out, how do I get them on board with this? Because what we always say is people have to come around to this in their own time, and there's only so much gentle leading and education that you can do before people are like, no, absolutely, that's not true, or I don't believe this, or show me the research, or whatever it is. Right. So how do you set that boundary of like, when you say specific things about XYZ or you make certain suggestions, that's actually really triggering to me, but I don't want you to not try to be supportive either.
Yeah. And I think a lot comes up here as I'm thinking about couples in both directions, because I've worked with a lot of couples where someone doesn't necessarily recognize that they have stuff going on with eating and food. The way that they navigate with that with their family is to force their belief system upon everybody else. So there will be like a very common example is definitely like the orthorexia stuff. So
I see a lot of parents. I work with a lot of parents. I was going to say, I was like, we talk about it's not just partner to partner. Sometimes it's partner to partner, but how to handle the children.
Partner to family.
It's the children in the grocery store who are like, this is toxic. This is toxic. This is toxic.
Yes.
Oh, girl.
I will say that's
therapy later.
Difficult. That's a very difficult dynamic, because there is a very strong belief system that, feeding your kid a hot dog once is like actually going to give them like cancer. Like it's like this very strong belief system, and it's painful to them, and it brings up a lot of anxiety, and they really believe it. And then you'll have the other partner being like, I can't win. Like, I want to feed my kids blueberries in the summer, but you think there's too much sugar in them. And I don't know, like, your reaction is very hard for me to deal with.
Or I don't want to restrict the kids. And I'm like, this is actually safe. This feels like something that you need to work on. And
exactly.
We all are like, I'm trying to protect the children from this behavior too, of this obsession. Like, and I guess, and then it's like, this orthorexia is the third. And it's the eating disorder is the third. And it's like funneling through the whole family. And I find it to be really difficult. And something that I've been coining it as is like this health load
Yeah.
too that parents are carrying. And if you have an eating disorder or disordered eating or obsession with orthorexia, it like, it takes over the whole family.
And it's hard because it is very real to that person. And so asking that person to let go of that belief system is threatening in itself, right?
Yes.
Like if I were to say something like, I think it's okay that your kid has birthday cake at a birthday party, like I can't say that to them, nor can their partner, because the response is, but it's not okay. And nobody else does the research. I do the research and I know what will happen to them if they do it. And so there's a lot of fear. When that type of thing, what's really important is being able to talk to the fear. And I think this is why couples therapy is so important, because it's a lot to assume that a partner, even the most loving partner, is going to be able to just be like, all right, I'm not going to get into it about the cake. I'm going to get into it about, I know that you really care about our kids and that this is your attempt to be loving. And I want to talk to you first about your fears and like actually letting those out to alleviate that stress a little bit. And then being able to, in the relationship, this is where it's really important to be able to say that can't be your third. That's getting so much of our resources and time and energy. It's making more decisions for our family than I get to make decisions for our family. And this is where my line is. If the eating disorder is making decisions for our children, it's no different than your mother making decisions for our children without my permission. And so, but it's very hard to get through. If I'm in the room, I can say that to the person. I can say, I know you love your kids, but for Google to be making more decisions about the way that they navigate their meals than your partner, like this is a real issue here. And then what I tend to spend time talking to people about is that these are philosophies and we can look at them both. I try not to put any charge behind the philosophy, not yours is like lesser than, or yours needs or anything like that. Nothing like that. Look, this is your philosophy. Your life philosophy is that for people to be healthy, they should know what's in their food, pay attention to what's in their food. That's for you and your therapist to decide if that's the right philosophy, but this is the philosophy and belief system.
Yeah.
And your partner's philosophy is that restriction isn't helpful, that people should be able to try all types of foods and that there's a healthy balance, but that ultimately part of the joy of life is eating junk. And that's their philosophy. And let's talk about your differing philosophies, because once we do that, we're removing this person as the patient. Like, you're the problem. You are irritating with all of this. And for a moment in time, both people get to just say, this is my belief. And then you try to move into, now, how do we create a win world? And if somebody is very tightly wound with this, it's not easy. It's going to take a lot of time, right? They're going to have to do their own individual work with it. But they do start to get the bug in their ear of, in order to have a happy relationship, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's that I have to be willing to create a world where my partner's perceptions, thoughts, needs, parenting style is considered as much as my own. And if I'm entering this relationship thinking that I am smarter, better, the only one that can make decisions, it's actually just going to be a relational problem. So we don't even need to talk about it as an eating disorder at this point.
Yeah.
We're already doing that maybe elsewhere. And if I see it and they're not doing it elsewhere, then I say, have you ever talked to somebody about that? Maybe you should go eat. But what we're actually talking about is, the reality is, if you are constantly steamrolling your partner over your food beliefs, your partner's going to get sick of it and your relationship's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so either you can do this on your own and there can be better boundaries around how you make these decisions and agreements, or you go get help with somebody who can help you with some of this rigid thinking. But that's one of the ways I would address it. And I don't think I answered your whole question, but it was just what was coming up as I was.
No, I think the other part of it was because we definitely talked about when you have it and how it impacts the entire family. But I think it'd be interesting too about how this impacts the relationship between the partners in the partnership too,
Yeah.
especially when one person is maybe recovering from kind of chronic disordered eating or body image stuff and things like that. And the other partner, like Dana was saying, the other partner is seemingly unsupportive or not there yet. Like they're not, their belief system is very different from theirs. And and they just feel very differently about it. And how difficult that can be for a couple to navigate when maybe at one point their belief system was the same.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I was going to say too, is
That's
I
so
see this
hard.
the most in couples that have been together for a long time. And they maybe were both once on the same page, even if it was a disordered page, right? Of, oh, we do all these things together. We go to the gym. We count macros to an obsessive amount. We never eat out. These are all of our very structured beliefs, in orthorexic beliefs, I would say, in this way. Or even if it was never like that, maybe just one partner was like that and the other one was like, oh, this, you do whatever you have to do. I feel confident in your health because you are this size or whatever.
Body changes postpartum. Like all the things.
That
Well,
also.
even just changes.
All of that. Yeah. Any changes.
Sizes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you might have thought the entire time that you and your partner were on the same page. Maybe you were at like Phillies games eating cheesesteaks and French fries, and you never had any idea that your partner was binging. And then all of a sudden, 5 years into the marriage, they finally admit to you, I've had this problem for a long time that I'm just now admitting to myself, and my lifestyle is going to have to change. And I'm actually not on the same page about the way that we eat anymore. Or maybe somebody was less restrictive in general, and then something happened, postpartum body changes. And all of a sudden, like this person you used to go out to dinner with all the time is, I don't eat out of the house anymore. Like I can't do that. So all of these things can really impact the partnership. And I think that number one, and I always go back to this, couples therapy can be really important as long as you're with somebody who understands how not to trigger something into being worse, which, like, how do you guess that? You just have to hear some of your research. But when this is happening, you have to remember that one person's stress often is going to be felt in the other person's body. And however they deal with stress is going to play out in the relationship. So you have this partner who's saying, I need to change my relationship with food. I know we used to always count calories together anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. This is going to be felt as a stressor to the other person. And their response to that will likely play out how they usually respond to stress. So maybe they get argumentative with you. Oh my God, you're being ridiculous. How could you be so unhealthy? That's so irresponsible. What's wrong with you? Maybe they get withdrawn. Fine, we just won't go to the gym anymore together. I don't know, just aren't going to eat now at the same time. Maybe they just stop connecting with you over it. Maybe they're constantly throwing suggestions because they feel really activated about how to help you. And if you can look at it as this is stressful to them, it's not my problem to fix, but their response is coming from something that's being challenged or triggered within them as well, for better or for worse, then you're going to start on a page where you have empathy with each other instead of my partner is such a jerk, they're not supportive. The second part of this that I think is really important is if you have a partner who's unsupportive, some of them truly are just jerks, right? But that is, in my experience, that's the rarity. Most people are either flooded themselves about the topic and overwhelmed about whatever's happening, either the change in lifestyle or what they're seeing you go through or what it means about them or how it's impacting kids, whatever. Number two, they just don't have enough information. Like they've never had to be empathetic and slow with things before. They've always really thrived with being problem solvers, or their life view and vision is if you just work hard enough, you should be able to change a problem. So I don't get it. Just do it. And this isn't because they're a bad person. They just need someone to talk them through it. And so if you go to couples therapy, you can have the opportunity for your perspective to be there. These are things I'm trying, and this is how my partner is sabotaging it. You also have that person where you could say, are you trying to sabotage this, or is it just hard to know what to do? And you can provide education, you can provide tools for how to actually talk to somebody about it, and you can begin to think through, how do we create a win lifestyle? you got together because you liked doing certain things together, you had similar values, maybe things have shifted. That doesn't mean it has to be the end or it's a horrible problem. But if we can consciously say, here's the shift, now what does that change in our relationship and how do we give each other
Yeah.
person needs?
Yeah, I want to say something real quick about that value part, and then I'm going to jump into this other part that you talk about a lot during the book that I want to incorporate in before we wrap up. But one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about the value part and how this is something that we value together, that's such big change. And for me, one of the things that I've always told my clients when they're talking about this, I'm not moving away from this value. I'm moving away my obsession with this value. And there's a big difference. And I think sometimes when you can talk about that a little bit more, then the two people can come together and it's like, oh, okay, I didn't realize, because your partner might be like, I just thought we liked to go to the gym 5 days a week. I didn't think it was like that big. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I had no idea that you had wrapped up into it that if you didn't wear a size small Lululemon, that you were a failure in life. Like, I had no idea that's what was going on in your mind and that it was becoming this big thing that was impacting you so much. And so I think sometimes, I'm not letting go of these values. I still really do value eating a nutrient dense diet and having a lot of variety in our foods. Or I also want our children to eat vegetables sometimes and whatever. I'm just not going to force feed them vegetables all the time. Like, I'm just letting go a little bit of this obsession around it. And I'm going to try to relax a little bit. I think that's also like something that I think can be like a nice way of realizing in a partnership, they might not get it.
Yeah, I think
they might not get it.
It's important is that often people don't recognize what their value is. They put the wrong name to their values. So like you said, maybe they're going to the gym 5 days a week and all of a sudden they're like, well, do we have the same values if you don't want to work out anymore? And I think a really important discussion is it that you no longer value health? Has that changed? And the person will be like, no, I actually value it even more. Like, I've always valued it, but I'm actually living it more because I recognize that for me, that wasn't health. So just because I'm not going to the gym anymore doesn't mean that I don't value health. It means that I have a new way I have to value it. And sometimes that can really help. I think about alcohol as an example as well, where people are like, if you aren't drinking, that means I can't drink in the house anymore. What are we going to do to have fun with each other? This is something that we used to do to connect. So is the value alcohol or is the value the connection? Well, the value is the connection. Great. So let's figure out how else are you going to still have fun and have like sexy time together and movie nights, but like without alcohol. And I think it's the same if you had similar food values where it's, no, we still both value like our kids getting the nutrition they need. And how do we do that in a way that it fits my view now, my philosophy of what it means to be healthy? It's not that I've changed my value. I just have a different belief now on, for me, what health.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the other thing that I wanted to bring in, because in the book you talk about this a lot, and I could see how in some of these instances where you're talking about when the couple is flooded and these things are coming up, you talk a lot about co-regulation. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how do you co-regulate when you're both like coming back with, this happened when I was 5 and everything is wrong and I cannot get there. And how do you co-regulate when maybe you do have differing philosophies right now and you're navigating this thing? How do you create that sense of safety? And like you said, that bubble that we're creating in our home with our partners.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about the example that we've been talking about, where maybe this partner is hearing the person's complaint and they're thinking, well, why don't you just do something about it? The reason we're bonding that way is because they're starting to dysregulate with their dysregulated partner instead of being able to see, okay, they're having a hard time. That's why it's still hard for them to change what they're eating, or it's still hard for them to do what they need to do, like go to the gym less. That's why it's hard. They're having a hard time. And if you can recognize in your body, I notice that I'm starting to get amped up about somebody else's problem. And I'm feeling it in my body. I'm feeling like my heart is racing. And why am I getting amped up to the point where their stress has now become my stress? And of course, in their own private conversations, they would say, it impacts my life. But in that moment, being able to say, I don't want to dysregulate things further. I want to regulate things in a better way is a really important approach. And it takes a lot of practice. But what that actually looks like is saying, wow, while we're having this conversation and you're thinking this in your head, I'm noticing my body is tense. I'm irritated. I'm starting to want to roll my eyes at you. I'm starting to want to tell you what to do. And if I notice these things, it means I need to calm my own body down. Because when you calm your own body down and the other person can sense it and their body starts to feel more calm too. And so you don't want to ping pong all the time. They're upset about something. Now I'm more upset and then they're more upset and then I'm more upset and we just go back and forth. But if you could actually, in these frustrating moments, difficult moments, stressful moments, say, whew, okay, my only job here is to actually take a deep breath, try to talk with a calm voice, ask questions, be slow. What's going to happen is you both are going to start feeling better. And if you don't, if your partner still stays dysregulated, at least nothing has gotten worse.
Escalated, yeah.
It's not escalated. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Because I think that's really because a lot of these topics are so passionate driven and they're really hard for a lot of people. And so it's really normal to feel your heart start racing and feel dysregulated or feel overwhelmed by this topic or even scared to have this conversation, especially if you have a history of being a people-pleasing, perfectionistic, highly empathetic person. So it's what I'm going against the norm. I can't do this or whatever it is. You're going to feel your heart rate starting to go up.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice hearing how we can do this for our partners. And actually, I really loved how in the book, how it said that actually the research shows that when you do this when one partner does it, the other partner actually starts to calm down too, which I thought was really interesting. And I have definitely seen that in real life with my child and then with my partner too. And, with Kate, I've seen that. I was wow, this is real life. I've seen that real life example of that. Not every time. Does not happen every time.
And I think also I think not always immediately, right? Sometimes it's a little longer. But I think if you have kids, one of the examples, you can bring that example up easily in your mind where your kid's being difficult and you're like, all right, that's it. I said, get out to the car. And it's nothing happens better. They start crying or they get frozen or they don't find the shoes that they were supposed to find. Whereas if you just took a moment to be I'm going to be calm. It's not that I'm not going to have a boundary with you, but I'm going to calmly say, okay, buddy, you still have to get your shoes. We still have to get out of the house. Then there's going to be a different response.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on.
It was so great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh my God. Such a great conversation. I know so many of our listeners will get so much from this conversation.
Definitely.
So aside from buying and reading your book, Till Stress Do Us Part, please tell the listeners where else they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Liz Listens, as was mentioned earlier. And also my website is ElizabethEarnshaw.com. And I founded a Better Life Therapy, which is in the Philadelphia region. So you can find me there too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
Thank you.